Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Presented by Pipe Wrench, and by Junk Be Gone, and by the Garza Law Firm.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Junk Be Gone studios for today's episode of the Sports Source. It's football time. We're down to the last month. They'll be kicking off here shortly, so we're going to dive in with both feet and talk nothing but football today on the show. And boy, there's a lot to discuss. We got recruiting. They got a big guy yesterday we'll talk about. They also, we're looking at some of the gambling sites are dropping the win total level from 9.5 to 8.5 games. What's up with that? Are they underestimating the Vols? Are we overestimating the Vols? Is Josh Heupel an elite coach? Can he be elite? Or will he never be elite? That'll be your poll question today, so you can play along there. Let's get right into it. First segment of today's show, brought to you by the Garza Law Firm. We're a month from the start of the season, and you're always thinking around East Tennessee, it's all about local. People excited about the Vols. When you're looking for an attorney, you need to think local as well. Somebody who knows all the local players in our East Tennessee legal system, someone who has experience here with proven success here. Well, that's Marcos Garza and the attorneys at the Garza Law Firm. Visit garzalaw.com to learn more. They'll take good care of you. And if you're one of these people, if you're having to deal with a lawyer, you're probably going to be kind of nervous. Most people don't like dealing with lawyers unless they're in some sort of bad situation and you're nervous. They can help give you some peace of mind. garzalaw.com. All right, I want to welcome in the panel for today. We have right over here Jimmy Hines, back with us, Bob Hodge. Both these guys have been with us since that first year. Way back in 2003 in Seymour was our first set. Right over there's Tyler Ivins, and we have, now Tyler was a new guy to our show just about a month ago. We have another new person today, Paige Dower. Paige, thanks for joining us.
Of course, thank you for having me.
And we'll talk a little bit about what you're doing here in a couple of segments from now, and what you and Jimmy are doing in terms of your production stuff, so we'll talk about that. Thanks for being here, we appreciate it. All right, when you look at the first section of Tennessee's football schedule, the first 4 games, it's basically August. You want to say September, but it's first game's August 31st. Then you got 3 in September before you hit the open date. Let's go ahead and put up the schedule so folks can see it. When you look at that and you're sitting there thinking, okay, to get to the playoffs, to feel good about earning a playoff berth, you're going to need to be 10-2. I mean, maybe somebody creeps in at 9-3, but I don't think you're going to feel good about your chances at that point. You're hoping. So to feel good about your chances, you need to be 10-2. My question is, you look at that schedule. If you need to be 10-2 to make the playoffs, does that kind of make it a must-win start by the time you leave September? Tyler, those first 4 games, if you're looking for the playoff, now granted, you could run the table the back end, but in terms of reality, realistically speaking, do you feel that's a must-win month if you're hoping for the playoffs?
100%. Yeah, and I think right there with that yellow line that you have marked there on the calendar, when you reach the first open date, if you're not 4-0, if you're not coming back from the SEC opener in Norman, Oklahoma, undefeated, you probably already have shot yourself in the foot of making the college football playoff. We've already talked about it off the air on radio shows when you've joined us here on the set. Tennessee's going to be underdogs in 3 of those 9 games. So one of those games is going to be that trip to Norman, Oklahoma. If 10-2 is the marker, and we already assume here, we were talking about some of those games earlier last Monday. Bama's also going to be a game that people look at and go, okay, can you play? Are those swing games for Tennessee? Georgia's clearly going to be a tough game. Before we got to this new calendar, I used to think that they did the schedule perfect. Great 1 big game in September against Florida, 1 big game against Alabama October, big game against Georgia November. This is similar to that schedule. You got to get through the checkpoint, first open date. You got to be 4-0 without question.
Next.
Oh, I'll throw out a question. I mean, if you lose to Oklahoma and beat Alabama, you're even. You're right back where you started. So is it a really big needed win? Yeah, I think it is. But must win, well, that'll be determined by what you do later.
But would you feel good about it? If you lose to
I
Oklahoma,
wouldn't feel good.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't call it a must win, no doubt, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, that's
et
the
cetera.
irony of me asking this question, because on this show for years I've always said the only must-win game is the one that's truly must-win. You can always do something else. So, yes, if you could start 0-2 and then win your last 10, maybe
Yeah.
you somehow finish 10-2 and
Well,
get in.
But see, I could imagine a scenario where you could beat Alabama. I don't imagine a scenario where you go.
0-2.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I don't know that I imagine a scenario. If you lose to Oklahoma, I don't know that you can. It's not only Alabama. That means you could lose on the road to Oklahoma, but you can't lose to anybody else the rest of the way. Yeah. Those last 8 games, you got to go 7-1 with a quarterback who's never started a full season. That I'm worried about. Paige,
Yeah,
thoughts?
I think winning in Norman at Oklahoma sets the table for the rest of, especially the SEC conference. I think losing that game to Oklahoma puts a ton of pressure on the back half, or really the remaining part of the schedule, because you have a bye week and then you're on the road against Arkansas and then you have Florida. That's not going to be, a gimmick of a win, because I feel like Florida the last few years has had Tennessee's number. There's so many built-in storylines heading into that Oklahoma matchup that I think you just have to win that game. Obviously, it's his former team. He coached there, led them to national title, runner-up in the Heisman. I think because of all of those storylines, you have to go and win that game.
Jimmy?
If you don't beat Oklahoma, I question whether you can beat Alabama. I wonder if your team's good enough to do that. So if you don't sweep, and I can't eliminate NC State.
Right.
North Carolina
Yeah.
State's projected by some to win 10 games. It's a pretty good football team.
Yeah.
But if you lose one of those two, I don't know that you can go 7-1 after that. So I would reduce it to less than 30% to make the college football playoff if you lose one of those 2 games.
Oh, I'd reduce it by even more than that. because
25%.
We'll get into later on where I stand on the
22%.
big picture.
So, so I think it makes it very difficult to get there if you lose one of those games. Now, we don't know how good Alabama's going to be. We're guessing. That's a lot of guesswork.
But all of this is. We're guessing
I
how
think
good
the same
Tennessee's
thing
going
for
to be.
Oklahoma. I mean, they lost all of their offensive linemen. They got all of it from the portal. How good will Oklahoma really be? I mean, you look to last year, they had a top 50 strength of schedule. It ended up being a top 14 strength of record. So they could end up being a much better team, and so could all the other teams. But understanding what they've lost, what they're replacing, I feel like you have to win because of that.
Well,
Here's your
my
weekly
point
reminder.
about Alabama is that there are more question marks about them now than there have been.
Yes.
Right?
Well,
Because
new
you don't
coach,
have Saban.
yeah.
You've lost 40 people in the portal. So that's why I'm saying we don't know what Alabama's going to be like.
Here's your weekly reminder about they can lose, but the ease of Ole Miss and Missouri's records this year, or excuse me, their schedules this year. A lot of people are anticipating, you've already touched on win totals, which we'll get into later. Their win totals aren't dropping. So you got to get as many wins as possible and collect as much as you can before you get to pivotal games in October and November.
Yeah, now realistically, if we get into this thing and Tennessee loses to NC State or Oklahoma, I'm going to say the same thing I said a few years ago when they lost to Georgia State. So the season isn't over. I mean, you lose to Georgia State, you lose to BYU, you start 0-2, and you finish to 8-4, and it was or 8-5. It was the longest win streak in the country outside of LSU, if you remember. I was beating that drum. And, you can turn those things around. I just don't like the odds of being backed against the wall going into the SEC. You would have played one SEC game, and now you can only afford to lose one more.
No,
That's tough.
I don't like the odds either.
Yeah, because
I think if you go to Norman and lose, there's a lot of things off the table.
or NC State.
Or NC State. I just think that if you have one loss in September, you still have a lot to play for going forward instead of, it's over, we're done.
Well, this is the interesting thing because there's always some number. If you got 4 teams in, then you can only lose 1 game. If there's 12 teams in, it's going to be interesting to see what the records are of the teams that make that playoff. We're all assuming right now, I said it, well, you're going to have to be 10-2 probably to feel good about it.
Right.
I mean, who knows? Maybe some 8-4 team slips in. Maybe it's the year of parity in college football. We don't know yet, but it is going to be interesting to see how that impacts schedules from here on out. If you're sitting there and everybody is now aimed at the 12-team playoff, and you lose too early, and let's say they lose to NC State and Oklahoma, then we're done. You're done. You're not going to go through Alabama and Georgia and the rest of the SEC. What does that do to your season? Because in the past, you could still finish okay, get on a run, be on a second longest winning streak to LSU that they did a couple. You could do that, and people would still get kind of charged up. If you've taken the playoff off the table, I wonder what that's going to do to a season. It's a new change, a new dynamic in college football.
I think when you have high expectations, then when you lose 2 games like that, it's harder. Because now the players are like, hey, where's the season going to go?
Yeah.
If you're projected to win 6 or 7 games and you lose 2, you still feel, we got something to play for. So I think that takes a lot of the intensity away from this football team if they lose 2 games early because your expectations are probably not going to be met.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Because I think when you can group it into your months or your groups of 4 throughout the season, this first 4 games, this first month, you have no room for error. You look at, later in the season when you've got a Florida in that month, an Alabama in that month, or even a Georgia in that month, you got a little bit more room for error because of the caliber team that you're playing. September, August, that's like your only month where you need to be perfect.
But if you set it up that way, that you have no room for error, and then you err,
Yeah.
then does your team tank like Jimmy said? Now, okay, we erred. We're done.
You don't want to be the team that erred. But any of those teams, and this goes for all these teams, when I say it'll be interesting to see how teams handle it, not just Tennessee. If a team starts with 2 losses early and their whole goal is the playoff, sure, you could still make it, but the odds are against anybody doing that. Does that team tank? And here's another thing to think about it. Let's say you've got some NFL first-round guy.
Bingo.
Who says, we're not making the playoff? Oh, I pulled a hammy. I'm going to sit this season out and take care of my pro prospects. Or somebody says, I'm going to hit the portal. You don't know. It's a different day and age. So, all right, when we come back, we've got a new topic for you we're going to play today. It's called More or Less. Are you more confident in Nico or less confident in the secondary? We got questions like that coming up. Come on back on the Sports Source. Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by A.G. Hines Company. Nudura, Drive It, Cultured Stone. When it comes to cutting-edge building materials, A.G. Hines Company is tops in East Tennessee. Find out why construction companies and do-it-yourselfers alike have been turning to them for more than 100 years. Yes, you heard that right. More than a century. A.G. Hines Company. Learn more at aghines.com. Okay. New segment on the show. This is really creative of me. I'm very proud of this. I'm sure of all the talk shows across the world now, no one ever has thought of this. We're going to play a game called More or Less. And here's the way we're going to do it. I'm going to start with these two, and I'm going to give you your own special question. Jimmy and Bob, the question is, are you more confident in Nico Iamaleava or less confident in UT secondary? More confident in Nico, less confident in the DBs.
Go ahead, Bob.
I will go that I'm confident in Nico.
You're more confident than you are less confident. Okay.
No. I was about to say, even though I'm confident in Nico, I think the secondary could be a crater.
Okay.
Everybody hated the secondary last year. They couldn't stand those guys. They're terrible. And these guys couldn't beat them out. The ones that were on the roster could not jump over them. So,
but you brought in a kid from MTSU.
And boy, oh boy, let's go hang our hats on that one. So I am less confident in the secondary. I'm confident in Nico, but I just think the secondary has a chance to be awful.
Yeah, okay. So less confidence in the secondary. Jimmy Hines.
I'm kind of reminded when I think of this with the secondary of a great quote from Bobby Johnson, who was a former Vanderbilt coach. He was at a SEC football media days, and he said, the good news is we've got 20 starters coming back. The bad news is we got 20 starters coming back from a 1-11 team. I think the secondary is in flux, just question marks. I think some of these junior college players transfer portal players are pretty good. But I am really confident in Nico. So I'm going to go Nico.
Wow.
I think he's going to have a terrific year. I think he's surrounded by really good skill position people. A little concerned about the depth at running back. Now, I'm not on board with one projection I saw where he's 5th in the Heisman Trophy race at 15-1 odds. I'm not that confident in him.
Bit much for a guy we've seen play one game.
Yeah, but I think this is an offense that'll go from averaging less than 32 points to close to 40. It won't be what it was in 2022, but I think he's that good. So I'm more confident in Nico.
Okay, so we got one that was less confident, one that was more confident. Very
see
good.
What that does to your poll.
Let's see how this works. Let's see how this works. I've got a question for Paige and Tyler, and your question is, more confident in the defensive line or less confident in the offensive line?
Ladies first.
I want to say I'm more confident in the defensive line. I think they have a ton of returning talent coming back. You even hear Tim Banks talking all the time that he is the most confident he's been in that unit. He thinks they could be the best line in the country.
Yeah.
I love having Amari Thomas coming back. That's great leadership that they have there. And then you look at, of course, James Pierce Jr. on the edge. Just maybe going to be a top 5, maybe even the top 1 pick in the upcoming NFL draft. And he had a great season last year, ending on a high. You talked about that start for Nico. James Pierce had, 1.5 sacks, and of course that pick 6 against what was supposed to be a really good Iowa team, but Tennessee did a good job of dismantling them on both fronts.
All right, I'll play contrarian. Lessen the offensive line, because if your name's not Cooper Mays, I don't have confidence in you. Andre Keurig, John Campbell Jr. But remember, John Campbell Jr. took the Virginia player and ran him into the sidelines.
Yeah,
the last highlight of the year.
Actually put him into Reese, who works here.
That's right.
John Campbell Jr. didn't do much after that, though.
What about Spraggins?
Javonte Spraggins, who I believe NFL scouts love him when he's healthy.
Yeah.
When he's healthy.
Sure.
So, question marks. I think the defensive line is going to have a great year. I've been the guy who's rah-rah the 10-2 season right after that win against Iowa. If Cooper Mays misses any time, I'm talking a game or close to the significant time that he missed last year, up in smoke. Season's over.
Because you don't have an Ollie Lane that can really switch up and down that
100%.
line. That plug-and-play kind of player.
All right, so both of you split, which I'm going to be the deciding factor then, and anybody who watches this show knows I'm going to go negative. So I'm confident in Nico as well. It's just he's a first year. I don't know anything about the secondary, so I'm going to be less confident in the secondary. In terms of the defensive line, I feel good about it. But again, I saw what happened when Cooper Mays went out last year. That offense slowed down. Part of that was on the quarterback, too.
Correct.
But they slowed that thing down. So if anything happens to Cooper Mays, it's a huge question mark. So, yeah, I'm going to have to go with the negatives just barely on both sides. So, Paige, Jimmy, you're losers. Okay.
Oh, great.
Welcome to the show. When we come back, we'll tell you what Cooper Mays told Jimmy Hines about Josh Heupel, and we'll see if you agree or not. Come on back on the Sports Source. Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Parkside Cabin Rentals. Millions of people the world over turn to TripAdvisor to help make their decisions about where to go and where to stay when it's vacation time. Well, guess who's a 2024 Traveler's Choice Award winner? Yep, same as 2023. That's Parkside Cabin Rentals. Find out why travelers the world over love Parkside Cabin Rentals. Visit parksideCabinRentals.com.
I didn't know too much about Coach Hype. Anybody that kind of knows me knows I don't watch football outside of, when we're watching film and trying to prepare for opponents. I didn't know too much about him. Learned quickly that he was a baller. At first glance, he doesn't look like a Heisman finalist or anything, but
or second glance.
Yeah, no, probably not the second or third, but he was a stud on the field, and he's a good coach, and he's what we needed, I think. And I didn't know much. I was just kind of waiting on to see how he was and how he handled himself and everything, and he's been great for us.
That is Vols senior Cooper Mays, who we were talking about in that last segment. He's saying that Josh Heupel, he didn't know a lot about him, but he was just what Tennessee needed. That is from a production by Full Disclosure Productions. Paige Dower, Jimmy Hines involved in that. Paige, tell folks where they can see video. And we showed another video that you did, an interview with Roy Kramer a few weeks ago. Where can folks find these, Paige?
Yeah, right now we're mostly housed on YouTube. You can go to youtube.com at Full Disclosure Pro, and you'll find all of Jimmy's great content that you have there. And I also just had an interview with Tennessee Baseball, their strength and conditioning coach in Q, and talking about that 2022 and 4 season. But with Jimmy, he just had a 2-parter with Cooper Mays. It was great information, obviously hearing about Josh Heupel and the recruiting process, and just always able to get really good interviews. So it's been really nice partnering with Jimmy these last few months. Well,
and he's Roy Kramer, Heath Schuler, 2-part interview. 2-part interview with Sterling Hinton. Very enlightening. It was good stuff. So, folks, I encourage you to check that. I encourage you again to check that out. Full Disclosure. Do you want Pro or Productions?
The handle is at Full Disclosure Pro.
There you go.
Keep it less characters for people to type.
Certainly. Well, that leads us into our poll question for today, and then I'm going to ask them to take part in this poll question. But let's put up the question. Here it is. Averaging 9 wins a year through his first 3 seasons, how does Josh Heupel look to you? And 1, he's an elite coach. Or, and it looks like a lot of you have already gone online to vote, most of you say, well, he can become elite. 72% say that. And then there's always at least someone who says he'll never be elite. Now, here's the thing.
9%.
I get texts during this show saying, how does Tennessee feel about not being elite? What does Danny White think about them not being elite? So I'll be interested to see how many people do that now. Or is it just the person who text me. The people who text me, it's just one or two of them, and they also have gone on there and voted. But here's what you do. Take your smartphone, use the QR code, and tell us what you feel there. The little orange lines will move, the percentages will change, and we'll tell you at the end what the final answer is from you. You can also go to sportsource.tv/polls and play right there. But please click for us. I always think this is interesting because the fans always take me in a direction I don't think they're going to take me. Now I'm going to start with you guys. Jimmy, you haven't spoken in this segment. I'll let you speak now. Is Josh Heupel elite? Can he be elite, or will he never be elite in your mind?
I think he can be elite. I'm not in the elite category yet. To me, he's had 2 excellent seasons as a head coach. His second year at Tennessee when they went 11-2. His first year at Central Florida, they had a 1-loss team. He has to accomplish more for me to put him in the elite category. And I don't think there are a whole lot of elite college football coaches.
Right.
But he's got to do more. And I'm not going to say he has to win an SEC championship to do that because that is so darn hard.
Especially now.
I was about to say that, no divisions.
But he needs to make a run of college football playoff appearances. He needs to do that before I would put him in the elite category.
Paige.
I would agree with Jimmy that he can be elite. He's shown flashes that he has that potential. You go back to that 2022 season and the national championship trophy is inside Neyland Stadium on the sideline as they were ranked at one point #1 in the country, showing that they were kind of just a few pieces away. Yep. Now you have a quarterback in Nico Yamaliaba. Is he going to be like a Hendon Hooker? You have that offensive line. We talked about it last segment. You've got Cooper Mays back. I think the stat between Cooper Mays, John Campbell Jr., and Gervonta Spraggins, they have 126 games between them, 90-plus starts. I think they have the potential to be a really elite team. They're getting more 5-stars in their recruiting class. They're, routinely in the top 15 in those recruiting classes. So I think the potential and the upward trajectory is definitely there.
I love the fact that he can win without having the best team on the field. We've seen that a few times where he doesn't have to, and we talked about that when they fired Jeremy Pruitt. I put the old set, had a wipey board over here, and I put a thing up, and the first thing was find a coach who can win with X's and O's and doesn't have to go out and say, well, we're going to recruit for the next 5 years and get all 5 stars, and then I can win. All right, so the good news is you've got a guy who has a system that can win. Now the next step is getting the players who can win titles. It's tough to win titles without players, but you can win without them, and he's shown that. Getting players. You just mentioned his recruiting. Looks like they're on good pace right now for this signing class. But when we come back, let's take a look at what Tennessee has done. It's a perfect, you can tell you're in television. It's a perfect tease. Let's take a look at what Tennessee's done over the last 3 years compared to the other 15 programs in the SEC. I was surprised by what I found. Is it good enough? And is it going to be better? Come on back on the Sports Source. Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Southeast Termite and Pest Control. Hot, sticky, humid weather. It can turn your basement or crawl space into a sweat lodge and a breeding ground for mold. And that mold, that mildew, can fill your vent work. Unless you talk with Southeast Termite and Pest Control about their crawl space encapsulation services. Bob, I know you're considering crawl space encapsulation.
Yes.
Southeast Termite and Pest Control does a great job with it. Visit them online, southeasttermite.com, to read all about it. Give them a call this week to chat about it. They do a tremendous service. They've been doing it for more than 50 years here in East Tennessee. They are my pest control service. Good folks. All right. And then I want to remind you of the poll, so please take part in this. Go ahead and click. Numbers aren't changing that much. Well, we do. There we go. You're getting some of the he'll never be elite people. I knew we'd get some of the negatives, which is fine. You're welcome here. And then the positive. Wow, the negatives outweigh the really positive. Look at that. Now it's switched the other way. So keep voting for us. I think this is interesting. Thank you very much. All right, gentlemen, back with Bob and Tyler. I'm going to put up a chart right now. Let's go ahead and put the chart up on the screen. I'll give you time to read this. Here's the gist. I wanted to see, it was just a wild goose chase. I wanted to see how it was stacking up. I didn't know what the answers were going to be. But I just thought, let's see who is bringing in the most talent in the SEC. 4 and 5 stars only, according to 24/7 Sports, since Josh Heupel's been here. Now, I went ahead and threw Texas and Oklahoma in here. So this counts them in the Big 12. That's 2 of their years of recruiting. What it does is it shows you the 2024 transfer portal, the 4s and 5s that came in for each school, the 2024 signing class, the 4s and 5s that came in from each school, then 2023 transfers recruiting, 2022 transfers recruiting, and then we tally it up all on the right side. Tennessee is 10th on this list. Okay, they are 9th when it comes to recruiting guys. They are 12th because they don't use the portal very much. They don't. It's one of the good things. They don't lose a lot of guys. They don't have to go out and chase a lot of guys. They're not living the way Lane Kiffin lives. But 9th, 12th, 10th overall, that would not be considered elite recruiting. Now, Ryan Callahan was here last week. He talked about the fact that Tennessee's probably going to wind up with a top 10 class this year. They aided that yesterday by getting Shady Hayward, a safety who immediately moved them up to number 8. So, and this is another guarantee. Tyler, you hadn't been with us long enough. If I do something in recruiting and it says something bad, the day before something good will happen. If I say something good, the day before something bad will happen. So,
speak it into existence.
So this doesn't look good.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about. But you moved up to number 8 yesterday. So maybe this is turning around. My question, though, for you guys, reactions to seeing these numbers when you are 10th in terms of the 4 and 5 stars, and you look at it, 34. This does not take into account people who've left now. This is just the draw.
Sure.
Yeah.
But you're 34. Guys, you're closer to the bottom part of the league than you are that tippy-top Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma group. Bob?
You know, the problem with this is even when you jump up to number 8, probably Alabama's still ahead of you, Georgia's still ahead of you, Texas is still ahead of you, LSU's still ahead of you. That's the problem you get in the SEC.
Right.
Is I look at Tennessee and I think, hey, they recruit fairly well. They do a pretty good job. And I think the number backs it up. I mean, you're okay, the 40, if you go over here and just start looking at the numbers, you're close. You're close to the bottom part of the league, but you're also close to that middle of the top part of the league too with some of these numbers. The problem gets into the eliteness of the elite.
Right.
And that's where you're coming up short, and I just don't know how you turn that around. I remember a few years ago the thinking was that NIL money is, that's the key to everything.
Yeah.
It really hadn't changed that much, and it is great to be number 8 in the country in recruiting. I think it's fantastic. But that still leaves you, 5th, 6th in the SEC.
Right.
And that's where your problem is.
Even in their down years, where Paige pointed out, they've been 14th, 17th, and 10th. I don't know the order, but 14th, 17th, and 10th in their 3 recruiting classes. That doesn't count the transfer portal, but they don't do a lot of business there.
Right.
That's not bad. That's good. That's kind of where Tennessee traditionally, you had the one former run where you were top 5 every year. But
you had a Butch Jones year where you were up
top
really,
5
really
once.
high.
Yeah, but for the most part, you're always 10 to 15. That's where and when they hired Derek Dooley, said on this show, you'll wind up 10 to 15. Butch Jones, don't worry about it. You'll be 10 to 15. That's just what Tennessee is. It's harder to get up there in the top 5, and the problem is if you're not in the top 5, you look over a 3-year period, and the other guy has 25 more 5 stars than you do.
Yeah.
Or 4 and 5 stars. Tyler, your thoughts on the chart? Is it nonsense? Is it
No.
throw it out and look at what's happening now with your top 8? You're going to be good. Where are you with this?
This is an indicator of a couple of things. One in particular, I look at 22, the year that Josh had the incredible 11-2 season after they won the Orange Bowl game, and it's remarkable what he was able to do even that particular year where he had 1 transfer portal player, as you pointed out, and you had 7 on the recruiting trail. What it also tells me, though, is we always bring up the phrase blue chip ratio. We always talk about who's cracking the door. Whether you like Bama, Georgia, Texas, the inclusions of Oklahoma, this is showing us something. And the proof is in the pudding. If you want to compete for national championships and if you want to compete on the recruiting trail to be one of the bad guys, the monsters of the SEC, these numbers have to improve. I think it's lazy sometimes when people say this, but it's true in this segment. Sometimes it's just the Jimmies and the Joes. This is showing you right now go look at teams that are ahead of Tennessee. You've seen a lot of success because of their Jimmies and Joes.
I kind of hinted at it in the last place. I think it's X's and O's. Give me an X's and O's coach. I want that. But to get to a national championship, if that's your goal, then it does take some Jimmies and Joes. You 100%. Better have you better have some pro players on your roster.
Yes.
It's harder to get over that last line. I think you can make a playoff with this roster, absolutely. We're talking 100%. About this year, they can make the playoff. The problem is, are you going to make the Final Four? Are you going to do this regularly?
You look at this list, Florida is ahead of you. Mm-hmm. They've got more Jimmies and Joes.
Now, they've had a lot of guys leave that aren't
counted.
But
it's the X's and O's that seem to be where they're tripping up a whole lot. So that's the reason that you do need both of them. And here's the question. If Tennessee, if this instead of a roster of recruiting and transfer portals, say this was Tennessee's schedule.
Oh.
Well, the guys above them, how many of them Tennessee going to be favored of? You've got 3 of them. You're right now not favored against any of them. Okay, then you get down to Florida. Okay, you'll be favored against Florida at home. Would you be favored? I keep saying flavored.
You wouldn't against Ole Miss.
You wouldn't against Ole Miss. Well, you wouldn't be against LSU.
You would be over Missouri, though.
You know, so.
The SEC for 17 consecutive years has led the NFL draft in selections. The teams that are ahead of Tennessee on that list John put up, how many of them come from those respective campuses and universities? I bet majority of them do.
The one thing that this chart doesn't take into account at all is finding the right quarterback blows away every other position on the field. Now, people may not like that, but it's absolutely true. If you gave me the choice of you can have 3 5-stars or 1 5-star quarterback, I'll take the 5-star quarterback.
Yes.
I just need the one quarterback. Give me the quarterback. So quarterback can make up a difference in this. If Nico Iamaleava is as special as we think he's going to be, maybe that is the one Jimmy and Joe who catapults you from playoff to national title type thing. So quarterback is partially, or not partially, quarterback is more important than all these other positions. You just look across the history of college football. Those guys that get drafted number 1, they typically win a lot of games in college. All right, when we come back, thank you very much, guys. That was interesting. When we come back, what underdogs on Tennessee's schedule should we be paying attention to? And we'll tell you about the national writer who says you should be paying attention to Chattanooga. Come on back on the Sports Source. Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Madisonville Marine, Creval Center Console Boats, Godfrey Aqua Patio Pontoon Boats, G3 John Boats, Skeeter Bass Boats, Hurricane Deck Boats. If you want to fish, if you want to ski, if you just want to lounge and entertain on the lake, they have a boat for you. They have all kinds of boats for all kinds of people. Madisonville Marine, Highway 411 North in Madisonville. They've been doing it since 1976, and there is no better place to buy a boat. All right, take a look at this. Someone wrote, and this was in The Athletic, Stuart Mandel, long-time, big-time college football writer. Stuart Mandel does a Q&A column, and somebody sent him this Q. Are there any FCS, FBS matchups this year where you see a real upset possibility? Here's his answer. How's this for a potential Week 1 shocker? Chattanooga at what likely will be a top 20 Tennessee team. The Mocs, who finished 17th in the coaches poll, that's in the FCS, have been picked to win the Southern Conference. They boast 3 preseason All-Americans in the FCS. Am I picking them to go into Neyland and shock the world? No, I am not. But it is within the realm of possibility. Is it within the realm of possibility? Absolutely, he says. All right, so I'm not buying that. However, a lot of us were trading texts during the Austin Peay game last year.
Yep.
Thinking, where is this thing going? Is it within the realm of possibility? Technically, anything's within the realm of possibility. But what I want to do is I want to play a more serious game of unseen enemies. All right? These are teams that everybody, and I wouldn't know where you're going. You've gone there all year, and I'll give you an example of mine. But these are teams that everyone thinks, oh, that's a breeze. You know, when fans are going through the list, and those just in the media are going through the schedule, you just go, okay, so you beat them. You don't even give it a second thought. Kind of like South Carolina 2 years ago.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is I want to find that South Carolina from 2 years ago. The team that everybody else thinks is a breeze that you think, no, I got a reason that might not be a breeze. And I'll give you my example. It's the starter. Mississippi State, I think, is picked 15th out of the 16 teams in the SEC. They got a new coach in Jeff Lebby. Jeff Lebby taught Josh Heupel this offense. Jeff Lebby and Mississippi State aren't going to be freaked out when they see speed coming at them with this offense. Jeff Lebby and that team, well, just remember, we didn't think, all those players left after Jeremy Pruitt. What has Josh Heupel inherited? That first year is going to be terrible. They went 7-6 that first year. They surprised a lot of people, and that wasn't the most talented roster in the world that he had. What if Jeff Lebby does that at Mississippi State? So in terms of unseen enemies, if I'm picking a team that everybody else thinks, oh, that's a breeze, and we're trying to find one that, that one could be some problems, I think it's Mississippi State could cause you some problems. Bob, ever since the season ended, you've been talking about this one team. I'll let you do it.
I just think that people are sleeping too hard on Arkansas.
That was mine.
And the reason is Arkansas can be a tough place to play.
It's on the road, yep.
Arkansas fans show up for the most part, even when their team stinks. They still come to the ball games.
And they call them hogs.
There's going to be a lot of suing going on. And I just read something to back it up just a few days ago that the Arkansas players, they really like Sam Pittman. Mm-hmm. And so this may be a team that when you get to that point in the season where they play Tennessee, they may be playing for their coach. And so maybe that gives them a little something extra to do. Tennessee may have lost the game in September. They have nothing to play for then. At least that's what I've been told. Anyway, I think Arkansas is the team I would not sleep on.
Okay. Arkansas, Mississippi State, where are you guys going? You can take the same, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm on Arkansas, and for a couple of more reasons. One, so let's say Tennessee beats Oklahoma. It's going to be an emotional game. It's a big game for Josh Heupel. And you got an open date where fans are going to tell you how great you are. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you go to Arkansas, which could be a trap.
And on the other side of Arkansas, you may be looking ahead to Florida, too.
Yep.
That's right. So then you also have Bobby Petrino. Is he going to work magic there? Now, he didn't at A&M because, as he told many people, he wasn't allowed to coach. Jimbo Fisher called the plays. Yeah. So now you've got him, and he is a very good offensive mind. So that's another factor that's involved with this situation. And the other thing is, the last couple of years, Tennessee has laid an egg on the road somewhere.
Yeah.
That concerns
to
me
a
a little
team
bit.
that you were unexpecting them to drop an egg to, like Missouri last year, South Carolina the year before, a very unexpected loss on the team. And I think that's why in the beginning of your segment, Oklahoma is very important because in years past, there's been a win or a loss that you're like, that should not have happened. They beat the teams they're supposed to, but they don't always beat the teams they're not supposed to lose to. Yeah. But on your parameters, I really wanted to go with NC State, but that's outside of our parameters.
Yeah, because that's a team that's going to be ranked in some polls.
But then the rest of the schedule is SEC teams, and there's other than Arkansas, there's not really another SEC team that I think people are looking past. I don't think people are looking past Kentucky. At some point, at least one quarter, that game is always exciting. Yeah. Kentucky always does something in like the second or third quarter of those games, or you're like, okay, let's lock back in. So if I can't go with NC State, I think I would go with Arkansas for that same reason, specifically because it is just after the bye week. It's another tough road game, and then you're trying to beat up on what will probably be a down year for Florida.
But I also think a lot of people are sleeping on Florida.
Because of their
Tennessee's
schedule,
been better than Florida how many times in the past 30-something years, and they haven't been able to beat them?
But that's a team that, if we're talking about teams that may have given up by that point, by the time you face them, they've got such a tough schedule.
Or they may be out recruiting players. If you look at their schedule, they may be trying to find people to put in the suit.
In the second month of the season? Oh, no.
All right, so we got 3 Arkansas. Don't sleep on Arkansas. And I'm the lone nut who says don't sleep on Jeff Lebby and Mississippi State.
That was a good one.
When we come back, the over-under win total for Tennessee is dropping on some betting lines. Are they underestimating the Vols, or are we here in town overestimating them? We'll take a look at that. We'll also tell you The Athletic has a formula for ranking teams. We'll show you where they're ranking the Vols. Come on back. Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Daniel Hood Roofing. Before you ever see a water stain on your ceiling, folks, your roof could be leaking. In fact, your roof could be helping to hide the damage. Get a free roof inspection from Daniel and his team this week. It's free, so what's to lose? Check out their website to read tons of testimonials from happy customers, danielhoodroofing.com. All right, what we have here is Austin Mock he's got a formula that he breaks down. He uses it on The Athletic, and it ranks teams, and he's ranked these based on play-by-play data from last year, returning production, recruiting rankings, and transfers. And as you can see, Tennessee is 17th on the list. The problem is that would put them 9th in the SEC. I'm not sure that his formula is right, that the top 17 teams in the country will have 9 of them from the SEC, but that kind of ties into that recruiting thing we looked at, that chart a couple of segments ago. 17th, all right, so that's a little surprising that they're 9th behind Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Missouri, Oklahoma. A lot of Vol fans won't like that. All right, now let's look at the win totals. This is interesting. Josh and Swain do a great job. They put out a newsletter every week, and I had missed this, but Josh put a note in there. You should sign up for that thing. Josh put a note in there about the fact that the win totals are slipping on some of these sites.
Yep.
And as you can see, it was 9.5 a few weeks ago just about everywhere. MGM still has them at 9.5. Caesar is still at 9.5. Bally's is at 9. FanDuel, DraftKings, and a site Sports Betting Dime all have it down to 8.5. Okay, Tyler, you gamble, I've heard.
Not very well.
Allegedly.
Not that I don't ride with Ivans, but okay.
Allegedly.
Are folks nationally underestimating Tennessee, or are we locally overestimating Tennessee?
I think perhaps locally we might be overestimating Tennessee.
Ooh, I thought you were going to go the other way.
Yeah,
Okay.
see, look at that little curveball for you. Here's my belief, and you hear this phrase often. Well, public building those tall buildings in Vegas, they usually are onto something. I'm not saying that they have a perfect algorithm, but the house usually wins. This gives me a little bit of pause, and the reason why it gives me a little bit of pause was because I've been adamant this year that I believe that Tennessee, at minimum, would be an 8-4, 9-3. Heck, I came on my radio show right after the Iowa win and said, that's a 10-2 team. I might have been Tennessee Tyler homering it up a little bit, but that being said, I'm not saying that Vegas completely, like a puppet or a ventriloquist, makes me believe one way or the other. I think this is a pretty solid indicator, and I think they might be onto something, which gives me a little bit, again, a pause.
Do you think that the national media or whatever is dropping their win total because there's not as much hype around this team as there has been in years past? And I'm thinking people might credit that to the fact that Nico's been a part of this team since January of 2022, and we've really not seen anything from him.
It was the most quiet spring practice I've ever
Exactly.
experienced. I mean, you had a basketball team that was winning, a baseball team that was winning, but it was a quiet spring practice for a team that people are talking about as a potential playoff team.
Well, I think even if you rewind back to the Citrus Bowl against Iowa, that was his first full start, full game. But what Iowa was showing you was to run the ball. He didn't have to air the ball out to get to the end zone. Just give it to Dylan Sampson and you win. So you're not seeing exciting plays from Nico. That's by design. So you lose the hype there, and then you start looking at all these other teams who are causing a lot of noise. Are you putting more stock in them, not less stock in Tennessee?
Well, let's turn it around. I'm the questioner.
Okay.
Tyler had his shot. I want to get your take.
Okay.
Are locals overestimating Tennessee, or are those people out there in the hinterlands underestimating Tennessee?
I think they're underestimating. I definitely think Tennessee can go out there and get 9 wins. Who are their 3 losses? Obviously, I think 2 are going to be Georgia and Alabama. Who's the third one? Is it going to be a team they shouldn't lose to? Is it going to be Oklahoma? Is it going to be Florida? I think everybody else they should beat. So I think anything lower than 9, you're underestimating Tennessee.
At this moment, quickly, 3 games. I mentioned it in segment 1. They are favored they're favored in 9 of those 12 games. So if everything plays out the way it should, 9-3, and depending on where you do your shopping,
8.5 is
there's your hook.
Jimmy, I've given them 2 options: overestimating, underestimating. Are they just being estimated? Meaning, if they got it right, do you think it should be 8.5? Is kind of your over/under, or do you think it should be 9.5?
I want to share this with this motley crew.
There you go.
I think
So good.
I think that 9.5 is the right number. I would be surprised if Tennessee doesn't win at least 9. So to me, I'm between 9 and 10,
Okay, so
not 8 and 9. So I think they're underestimating it a little bit. What has changed? Why would you drop the total? What
Are they basing this on people betting?
Yeah,
I mean, that's the thing. They're basing it on what people out there are thinking, so they're dropping it.
But the Wizard of Oz behind the cape, behind the curtain, all they've seen is 19 pass attempts in 4 quarters from Nico Iamaleava.
Yeah,
you're essentially weighing, will he reach what we believe his expectations are year 1?
The same 19 they had in February. So why does it change between then
I think
and
it's
now?
because they're putting more stock in other teams, not that they're putting less stock in Tennessee, but because there's no conversation around Tennessee, and there's tons of conversations about Oklahoma, what they're doing in the portal. There's more attention. You're like, oh, maybe they could be actually really good. NC State's number 21 in EA Sports. There's just a lot of attention on other teams, by default.
It also depends on who you're talking to, because right now you came out of the SEC media days, guys like Greg McElroy, Chris Doyle, they're talking Tennessee up right now. So they're going in that. Everybody's picking their own teams right now, and it's starting to take off. It is interesting, though, whether it ties back to spring, where it was very quiet, or right now the hype isn't really building nationally for this Tennessee team. Usually we look around here, and it's late July, that means you're going from 9 to 10 wins. And by the end of August, I expect 11 wins. And by the start of the first game, everybody has that, I got a gut feeling they're going to win the national title. So now you should be on the uptick right now. It is interesting that this team's just kind of
And I think what's interesting when you were mentioning it being quiet during spring, go to the spring game, the orange and white game, and it's actually Gaston Moore, the quarterback that came from UCF with Heupel, that kind of stole the show, and that was, again, by design. Nico was not out there very much. It was very much the second and third stringers that got a ton of snaps, and I think that's why there's not a ton of conversations.
One of the few people that hadn't changed his mind is Sterling Hinton.
Yeah, exactly.
They've been 12-0 since January.
12. Let's see.
I'm sorry, regular
SEC
season.
championship games and then 3 playoff games, so 16, I think, Sterling. All right. When we come, and I'll get a text in a minute saying, "Oh, baby." When we come back, we now know what the NCAA's legal settlement means for college football rosters. Oh, baby. That is going to be a mess. They don't believe in simple solutions. So we'll come back and explain that. What's it mean for teams like Tennessee? What's it going to do to college football rosters? If you thought things were about to get simpler in college sports, think again. Come on back on the Sports Source. Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Safety Systems. If you're in need of a new security system for your home or your business, call VFL JJ Surlis and the team at Safety Systems. They've always taken great care of me. You'll find their logo on business windows and in yards all over town, including mine. Safety Systems, they are fantastic. I've never had any kind of issues with them, and I've never heard anybody tell me they have any kind of issues with them because they are the premier group in all of East Tennessee. Security systems, life safety systems, you name it. Safety Systems. All right, let's take a look at the poll results. How'd this turn out? I expected the middle option to get the win, and that is he can become elite. Not elite yet, but can become elite. That's where I would come down. I think he's shown the possibility of upside there. 14% say he's an elite coach. 16%, slightly higher, say he will never be elite. Okay, there you go. Big roster changes coming to college football. Let me go ahead and I'm going to read this quickly. And I want all the panel to be ready to pick up if I just start coughing and die here. First of all, here are the changes that are coming with the new NCAA settlement. The 85 scholarship cap is removed. Schools are now allowed to give out up to 105 football scholarships. Football is now an equivalency sport. All sports will be under new rules, but there's no longer a head count sport. It's no longer a head count sport, meaning the school is no longer required to give full scholarships to each player receiving aid. That means football programs can now split scholarships if they choose to, like you see in sports like baseball currently. The 105 roster limit is firm, which will result in many programs having to greatly reduce their roster sizes, which they usually carry about 120, and that endangers a lot of walk-on programs. All right, let's take a look at the next one. From a numbers standpoint, well, let's see here. A wealthy school can just go out and sign 105 of the best players, period. All right, so you can do it that way. A school can opt to go with 95 or 100 scholarship players and then reward a few walk-ons with aid on the back end of the roster. Or a school could choose to be at 85 scholarships and keep 20 walk-ons. It's basically haves and have-nots, how much you spend. Schools can even go below 85 scholarships to try and have a more competitive overall roster by offering partial scholarships to players to spread the money around, potentially saving money to offer more to its best players with revenue sharing. Yes, it's getting ridiculous now. Let's go to the third one. Here's what you got. A number of football insiders talked 24/7 Sports. 2 months ago, I was hearing rumblings that it would be 75 or 85, said a Big 12 general manager. At least it's over 100. It's over what the NFL has in the offseason before they cut it down. I'm okay with that. There has to be compromise. An SEC general manager says it's a sufficient number. I think 105 is solid. You can still practice and withstand some injuries to have a quality practice. But it's not good news for walk-ons. Take a look at this next one here. The days of the walk-on in college football are probably leaving us, says Dave Clawson. He liked to get the ball to people in space when he was here, by the way, in case you haven't heard that. And then a Big 12 GM said, it sucks for the walk-ons right now. A guy busted his ass, and he may be told he might have to go. At the same time, I do think keeping walk-ons who have busted their asses the 90th to 105th spot, pretty good idea. If you're only going to travel 70 guys and you can have 35 players who are malcontents who are not on the travel squad versus guys who've earned it. That's not the end of it. We're going to do 2 segments on this because there are more potential headaches with this. But let me just get your initial thoughts. Like it, hate it, issues that stand out to you, thoughts?
Initially, this is another, Bob, this is another example of college sports turning into the NFL. I like that part whenever you were just reading through what we had, that clip there, the quote. You can pull back some money to save for your higher profile, more talented players to be able to keep them happy. You're not going to just herd cattle of 105 players and say, everybody's equal, everybody gets an opportunity to go out there and play. I mean, let's be frank. If you put this into a Tennessee scenario right now, wouldn't you parcel off a little bit more money to make sure that Nico was happy? Assuming, whatever allegedly what Nico's making. On top of the NILs, absolutely. I would rather save a little bit of cash than give it to the third string backup safety, whatever it may be. Here's that now general manager NFL tendencies we're talking about.
Bob, you walked on at UT for a little bit. Thoughts on this thing?
I've always thought walk-on programs were fantastic because, one, occasionally you find a guy that's really a good football player. I remember
Nebraska used to make a heyday with it.
Tim Stafford, William Lunt kid, went over there, became a long snapper, fantastic. If you couldn't have had a walk-on, you couldn't have done what Tennessee did at the time. I also think that it's not as complicated as some people make it out. I think Tennessee, the big boys, are going to give 105 scholarships. I think that's what they'll do. And if you can't afford to give 105 scholarships, sorry, you're probably not one of the big boys. You're probably not going to be around when the super conference comes.
Well, I do think the rich gets richer.
Yeah, and I think Dabo Swinney actually had good points during their ACC media days about how you will have a lot of frustration, especially when you get to that travel roster. Now you're going to leave scholarship guys behind. Or for them specifically in their 2016 national championship, it was actually Hunter Renfrow, who was a walk-on, caught the game-winning catch to win the national title. You miss out on stories like Baker Mayfield. So at Oklahoma.
Stetson Bennett at Georgia.
Exactly. So when you have this frustration of that travel roster and you have scholarship guys being left behind, they might go to other levels like FCS, but jokingly, maybe Vanderbilt becomes a good team now because those other scholarship guys, are they going to want to stay in the SEC and then maybe go to Vanderbilt? Does it kind of even the playing field when you don't have these walk-ons? Do those walk-ons become scholarship guys at smaller schools like Vanderbilt, or does Chattanooga actually become a team that can threaten Tennessee in the future? Yeah. Leaves up for a lot of questions.
There's a lot, as these coaches and programs try to figure out how they're handling it. The middle range programs, there's going to be a lot of hit or miss. And I think you're going to see programs get really destroyed for a while. I mean, if you make a wrong decision and you zig and everybody else zags, you can really set your program back miles. And also you could wind up losing guys by, I'm going to give you a partial scholarship, but I'm giving him a full scholarship, not taking you on the road. There's just more room for people to be disgruntled. It used to be you were on the team and you either got playing time or not. Then it became how much money you're getting. Why is the left guard getting more than me? The right guard came in with this NIL. Now you're throwing another thing into it. And it's overly complicated in my book.
I think what it'll end up doing, it will hasten that sifting we're going through of getting down to, okay, we've got this set of teams, this huge conference. A super league. I think this just speeds that process up.
How do you think it impacts bowl games when you have players that year in and year out are obviously opting out? You see how upset Florida State was when they were going into their bowl game. They had 20-some guys opt out. That's the time when you need your walk-ons. Do you still have that with a 105 scholarship roster?
And I think what's going to happen with that is when all this stuff starts happening, I think you'll see some schools say, you know what, you're playing football here, you ain't opting out of nothing.
Yeah. All right, we got to catch a break. All right, when we come back, there are still several potential issues that could be coming up with a football roster near you. We'll discuss those next. Come on back. We'll show you the next headaches. Welcome back to the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Games and Things. In the coming months, we're going to be talking to you about a brand new Sports Source project we're doing, and it will involve a game room. So where do you think I turned? Well, Games and Things, of course, because they have so many table games, hang on your wall games, bars and bar stools, anything you could need to build the perfect entertainment room in your home. Games and Things does it. I know for a fact. I've been there. I've got their home theater seats in my home, and we're going to have some of their other stuff in this new game room we're building. But we'll tell you about that down the line. All right, let's run through some more of these headaches, some more 24/7 Sports, talk to a few more coaches and GMs across the country, and here's what they threw out. The programs at the top are going to be able to sign 105 good players, you'd think. Maybe not 105, but 95 to 100 legit players, where some of the teams that are struggling are not going to be able to do that. So the rich will get richer, as we said in that last segment. The hurdle, in general, will be you're recruiting a guy and maybe a school has decided to stay at 85, but another school is going to give out 105 scholarships. So you're talking to this guy about financial aid and maybe having to pay part of his way, and this other school says, we'll put him on scholarship. That's head coach Bill O'Brien at Boston College. I think that's a hurdle that some of us, Boston College, are going to have to deal with. Let's take a look at number 2 here. It brings an interesting dynamic, said an SEC general manager. It's a lot to digest. It's a good and bad thing. We already went through and set the numbers at each position we thought would be good for the 105. What's going to happen is, for instance, our number for wide receiver is 14. To carry 14 scholarship receivers who are all quality players and continue to make them all happy would be very difficult. What does the 10 to 14 look like? Is number 13 or 14 program guys that would be your typical walk-on developmental player? Or do you sign the best 14 you can and know that there's going to be some anticipated attrition every year because you can't keep 14 receivers happy? And then the next one, when the revenue share, are they going to allow you to do multi-year contracts, the SEC GM said. Can a guy be locked into a 2-year contract to provide a bit more stability from a roster standpoint? Yes, it's 105 scholarship players, but do all 105 have to be part of the revenue share? Or can you say 85 are part of the revenue share, but the next 20 are on scholarship but don't get the revenue share? Bunch of different questions there. Said another Big Ten general manager, I think it's going to be a crapshoot. And I don't disagree. I like simple. I'm a simple man. I don't understand how you can't come up with a simple answer. Maybe that's why they're finding themselves in legal trouble in the first place. They tried to keep it simple and it's just more complicated. But boy, this is taking anybody who thought, well, you're going to pay the players. Yeah, well, now you're adding all these different layers, and I don't know about you, it gave me a headache just spending 60 seconds reading that. I'm sure hearing it was more annoying because I was the one reading it. Yeah. But your thoughts in general, Jimmy, you weren't in that last segment. Your thoughts on this? And you pick a headache you want to speak on, or just take it as a whole.
Crapshoot is a very good explanation of what we got going on right now. I remember Greg Sankey at the SEC spring meetings made a comment, we don't need to make any decisions that are going to lead to more lawsuits. I don't know if this will, but what's the purpose of this? Why are you restructuring all this? What's the goal? What's the aim? Why did you have to do it? I don't know the inner workings of why. If you tell me take this system or take the one you had, I'd take the one they had.
Yes.
I think that's a more simple and a more workable arrangement than what they're doing right now. So I don't know that they've really accomplished a lot. I do think you're going to add more dissension in the ranks of almost every sport that you have.
I think the NFL is a simpler system.
Yes.
Now, and the salary cap isn't easy, but everybody has the same salary cap.
Yes.
This would allow it to where some teams in the NFL can use the cap this way, we'll use the cap that way. To me, it would be easier if they had just said, all right, we're doing divisions, and we're FBF, FC. We got Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, Division 4. We got more divisions now. Division 1, you're giving 105 scholarships, and you're paying everybody, and it's part of the revenue share. If you want to be Division 1, that's the deal. Otherwise, you're Division 2, and you give 85 but 20 walk-ons. Don't bundle them all together.
Yes.
Instead of waiting for the sift to take care of itself, just do it. Get it over with.
Well, and here is something Jimmy said that Sankey said don't want to do anything, it's more lawsuits. I don't think you can avoid lawsuits. I think whatever you do, somebody is going to find an angle to sue it. May not win, but I think this thing will continue to churn itself away through court for a long time. And the precedent has been set that everybody thinks now they'll beat the NCAA. And so everybody's going to think, I'll go get a piece of the NCAA. Why? Because they always win, even if it's not a good case.
Quick, hire the guy that won for Tennessee and who won for everybody
else,
too. There you go. Yeah. Tyler, got about 40 seconds.
I now am in full belief that coaching in college football is not for the weak at heart. And we've made comments repeatedly. Coaches who have left have gone to the next level. Look, he didn't openly come out and say this, but it's a foregone conclusion. Jay Wright left Villanova college basketball because of what this was going to turn into, and now we're seeing it in football. Guys, I don't think I'd be surprised to see coaches, as much as they're getting paid millions upon millions, this is going to cause careers to come up short, or They want to go to the NFL and not to deal with
I
this.
think you're going to see younger coaches. I think you're going to lose mind power in the college game. I think younger
Yes.
coaches are now going to say, I'd much rather get on the NFL track than on the college track.
Bingo.
I don't want to deal with any of this crap. And we had Justin Hamilton here a couple of years ago, former Virginia Tech defensive coordinator, did a great job on our show. I wish I could outpay the Indianapolis Colts where he is now, but he's been with the Titans, he's been with the Colts. Talking to Justin, that pro game is a whole lot better than the college game. And that was, he wasn't dealing with all this stuff.
Yeah.
So,
You got time off if you're a pro coach.
yeah.
Where does the time off come if you're a college coach?
It doesn't.
Yeah. And this
Zero.
looks like it's going to be, and for anybody out there saying, well, they make $8 million. Only the head coach makes $8 million. You got a lot of people who don't make anywhere near that, and they're having to work the same kind of hours and do the same kind of craziness. All right, when we come back, cool ideas and good business versus tradition. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on at Neyland Stadium. Their new entertainment district looks fantastic. It is fantastic, brilliant. And I'll tell you why I'm more happy with something the Rose Bowl recently did. Because I'm an old geezer. I'll explain. Come on back. Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Chris Smith Insurance. Folks, Chris is an agent for Farmers Insurance, but he's also an independent agent, meaning when you don't fit perfectly with Farmers, he has other options for you. He can really help you out. Shop your insurance now to see how Chris can improve your peace of mind and also save you a little bit of money. I worked with him just this week. You'll be glad to do the same. Chris Smith Insurance. Check him out, csmithagency.com. All right, take a look here. The Neyland Entertainment District. We told you about this a few months ago. So many pro stadiums are now doing this, but UT is going to be one of the first colleges to go all in. A hotel by the stadium. It's basically filling in that spot between Thompson Bowling or the Food City Center and Neyland Stadium.
Food City
Yeah. You're filling in that space with restaurants, bars, entertainment area. They're taking out, what is it, G10? That'll be the thing you lose. Yeah. But the cool part is, I mean, it's going to be a moneymaker. It's going to be fun for fans. It's awesome. I said a few months ago, this is brilliant. It's forward thinking. It's everything you would expect from Danny White. Kudos. And yet, I saw a story this week that I liked more because it's based in tradition. The Rose Bowl, it turns out, went to the college football playoff, and they said, we don't want to be in the semifinal rotation. We just want to stay a quarterfinal every year. It's like, why would you do that? Because that keeps you on January 1st. And they said, we've always been a January 1st bowl. That's where we want to be. We don't like moving off of it. We'll sacrifice being a semifinal, but we're going to be January 1st every year. This Neyland thing makes sense. I like it. It's brilliant. But part of me is like, do you have to change everything on my old campus? Can't there be one space where I at least know, oh yeah, that parking garage was there? So anyway, I just saw those two stories, and I found myself, even though this is great business, I found myself more moved by the fact that the Rose Bowl said, we know who we are, we know what we're about, and we're going to stick with it. Just my thought.
Initially, I thought that was kind of silly, but then I'm thinking about the third Saturday in October, and I'd be really upset if that moved to the fourth Saturday or to another month. So I guess in some scope I can understand, but if you're the Rose Bowl and that means so much more than just a January 1st game, I feel like you're missing out on being a semifinal game. I think there's more to lose staying at January 1st.
I also think this is the kind of thing where, I may be wrong here, we'll see what Bob and Jimmy do, we'll see what Tyler does, but I think it's going to be based on age too. Because when I was Paige's age, your age, I would have said, do it, change everything. What do I care? Because I didn't have as many years tied into something. Now at 53, it's like, well, G10's been there my whole life. What are you talking about? We can't change that. So, Tyler, where are you on this? Do you Neyland, the forward-thinking stuff, or are you kind of impressed with the traditional stuff of the Rose Bowl?
I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth, and we're taught not to do that.
Cavalerising the question.
To your point, and I thought you brought up a great point, you've got to do entertainment things to get people off the couches in front of their giant televisions where they only have to walk 6 feet to their own refrigerator or to their own commode, whatever it may be. But you brought up a great point.
That's the big selling point.
No, the great point was simply this. I was like, who cares about tradition? But guess who's the first person that squawks every time Tennessee and Kentucky plays, and that dang beer barrel isn't out there? So I'm talking out both sides of my mouth. Good for Tennessee, but yeah, maybe don't kill tradition.
15 seconds.
I'm going to surprise you a little bit. I don't care because you've already destroyed the campus I was on, so you might as well tear the rest of it up while you're at it.
Where has my
15
campus
seconds.
gone?
There's a whole lot of this used to be and this used to be
Yeah.
on Tennessee's campus because they have changed so much of it. But I'm fine with this because I think it appeases the fans, and I do think it gets more people to go to the games instead of staying at home.
Okay, my clock must be off. We'll see you next week. See ya.